What's up, middle schoolers? I know some of you guys were excited to get back into person. Unfortunately, we can't do that this week. We had to push it back another week. But we're going to make the most out of this situation, and we're going to have some fun. I apologize for the aesthetics going around here. I'm in my basement, quarantined. I do not have COVID myself. But I was in close contact, so I'm following the CDC guidelines, the 10 days, trying to keep everybody safe out there. So that's the situation we're in. But despite all of that, we are in our final chapters of the Mark series, and I know that's hard to believe. It seems like we just started that, but we actually started that series back in August. If you can believe that. I don't know if I can. But I've been super proud of all of the progress that you guys have made through that, and just the challenges that you guys have been doing and stepping up to the plate. And even just you guys' biblical knowledge has grown. After the series, you will have read through, if you've been keeping up, the entire book of Mark. And so if you've done that, give yourself a good little pat on the back, because you're doing a good job, and just keep it up. But before we get into the story for today, I got a couple of announcements to go through. CIY, it's a camp, a CIY mix. It's for middle schoolers. They have some of the best youth speakers in the world, people that aren't going to mess up like that, but people that are going to be bringing the word and saying some great things. Your friends will be there. There's some awesome music that they bring up, and it's an amazing time, and I really hope we get to go this year. And so if you're excited for that, and if you're down to do that, hopefully we got a vaccine going by then, and then people are getting back into things so we can start gathering in groups again. But CIY is June 10th through the 14th. It's $350, and you can register online at socc.org/themiddle. And there's actually an early registration deal of $100 off happening right now. And so if you guys can get in there and sign up, it's going to be worth the money. CIY is awesome, and we know you guys are looking for an opportunity to have some community, and so this is an amazing way to do that. And for all the people who were at CIY Mix last year, we did it at the church, and so hopefully this year we get to go somewhere and do this, because that would be awesome. But that being said, our next series, now that we're finishing with Mark, is going to be the middle series. And so you have a lot going on right now with family, friends, and just the world in general. And so in the middle of all of that, who are you turning to? And so we're excited to be talking through what that looks like. And so I hope you guys are excited to come next week and meet in person to start off our series on the middle. So, without further ado, let's get into the lesson. We left off in Mark chapter 14, where Jack led us through the Last Supper and the disciples kind of betraying Jesus all in their own way. And we said, despite knowing that Jesus is going to be betrayed by all of his disciples, Jesus sat down and had a meal with his disciples, and he showed them how much he loved them, by serving them, by washing their feet, by still giving them a lesson. And even when Judas went to betray him, Jesus still told them how much he loved them. And so the point of that lesson was to show us that even amidst all of our mistakes, Jesus still loves us. And so now we're going to be moving on to a little bit heavier stuff, Jesus' crucifixion. And so the theme of this week is that Jesus experienced pain. Now, I know that might sound like an odd theme to have, and especially an odd theme to kind of end our story, but stick with me. Jesus was God. He was fully God, but he was also man. He was fully man. And I know the math works kind of weird on that. 1 + 1 = 1 still. Your math teachers won't like it, but that's kind of how the situation is. And so Jesus was fully God and he was fully man. And that's kind of a hard concept to grasp, but some situations within the Bible or within creation are a little bit harder to grasp. And so Jesus gives us some warning on that. He says to focus on the earthly things that we can, and let him take care of the heavenly things. And so if we can't even understand the earthly things we have here, then how could we understand the heavenly things up there? And so that's kind of a hard concept to grasp. And so if you feel like you're struggling with that, it's not a big deal. Your salvation does not rest on that fact. But moving on, he was God. He was also man. He humbled himself and became human, experiencing the same struggles that you and I face, the pains that we feel. He was tempted, he lost friends, he was betrayed, he felt lonely, and ultimately he experienced death. And that's what separates Christianity from any other religion in the world. We have a God who humbled himself, experienced our pain, and died an innocent man. He took no shortcuts, and by doing all of that, he showed us how to live. If you'll open up to Mark chapter 15, verse 33, we'll get into scripture. And so I'm going to be reading out of the NLT, which is the New Living Translation. Just one of my favorites. You might like it. And so just some background going into this verse. Jesus' crucifixion has already started. And the time of the crucifixion was around what we believe to be 9 o'clock in the morning. And so at noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. Then at 3 o'clock, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a reed stick so he could drink. "Wait," he said, "let's see whether Elijah comes to take him down." Then Jesus uttered another loud cry and breathed his last. And in the curtain of the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. When the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died, he exclaimed, "This man truly was the Son of God." Some women were there, watching from a distance, including Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. They had been followers of Jesus and had cared for him while he was in Galilee. Many other women who had come with him to Jerusalem were also there. So, I also just want to take a moment and pause and say, Jesus' closest friends, the disciples, all kind of chickened out, but the women kind of stepped up to the plate. So this is a shout out to the strong women of the Bible. This was a good moment for them, but also a bad moment for them as they were experiencing this. So take in this moment to pause and think through, was it a sin for Jesus to ask God why he had abandoned him? And so the answer to that is obviously no. Jesus did not sin. We are merely seeing another moment in which Jesus shows us how to live. It is not wrong for you guys to have questions for God. It is also not wrong of you to share your true feelings with God. Jesus is experiencing pain like no other on a physical level. He is also experiencing pain on an emotional level, with all of his closest friends having abandoned him. And he is also experiencing pain on a spiritual level, feeling distant from God. And so Jesus, in this very moment, is not having a good time. And so God does not ask us to follow him blindly. There will be times in your own life when you will not understand why something is happening, why a loved one died, why a friend betrayed you, why you feel alone. This world is full of sin and hatred. And because of that, it's a broken world in need of a lot of repair. And one day, God is going to come back and restore this world. But until that day, you're going to be left with a lot of questions. A perfect example of this is Toby Mac, a Christian music artist whose faith was tested when his 21-year-old son died an unexpected death. And so Toby Mac wrote this beautiful song called 21 Years. And that, fair warning, it is a pretty sad song. And so if you're not about sad songs, I don't recommend listening to it. But it is also a very hopeful and has a strong message in the song. And so in the song, Toby Mac questions God, why did this have to happen? And lets God know how much it hurts him. But ultimately, he ends the song by saying, 21 years, what a beautiful loan. And he ultimately gave up his power and realized that God's place as his son's true father. And so the song kind of reminds me of the Psalms that David would write in his darkest times, when he was being chased by Saul and just felt alone and broken. And so when Jesus is asking the question, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's actually quoting one of David's Psalms from the Bible. And so, guys, when you're in a dark place, when you are hurting, Jesus experienced pain and he understands yours. Let him hear your feelings, ask him your questions, and give him your doubts. But through all of that, understand that God is in control. And we'll see that played out through Mark chapter 16, starting at verse 5. And I'll give you some time to get there. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in white robe, sitting on the right side. The women were shocked, but the angel said, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, but who was crucified. He isn't here. He has risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid the body. Now go and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as I told you before. He died." And so that was Mark chapter 16, verses 5 through 7. The story was not over, and neither is yours. Wherever there is hatred and sin, there's also love and forgiveness. And so as you go out into your weeks, please remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for you. He loved you so much that he was willing to go through all of that pain to save you. And so as we kind of conclude this Mark series, I have a special guest who is going to share a communion thought. Grayson Gardner, a 6th grade girl who is also my sister, has bravely stepped up to the plate to talk about what communion means to her. And so even though we aren't all gathered together, find whatever you can, whether it be grape juice, apple juice, even water. Jesus is the living water. And then maybe some bread. And remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for you on the cross. His body broken for you, his blood poured out for you. And so the challenge for this week is just to remember that sacrifice and to also spend time in prayer this week, speaking your true feelings to God. I know that the quarantine and life in general, it seems like so long ago that things were, back in March, were normal, but now we're in March of last year, they seemed like it's so far away from that normal, and so it's hard. We've been in this for a long time. A lot of you have probably experienced those feelings, and so don't be afraid to take those feelings of loneliness, of whatever you're going through, and to give those to God, because he wants to hear them. He wants to hear you speak your true feelings. Jesus did in his final moments when he experienced pain. And it was not a sin for Jesus to question God and to ask him, "Where are you, God?" In those moments. And so I encourage you guys to do the same for yourselves. But I'll pray us out, and I hope you guys have a great day. You're staying safe out there. I love all you guys, and I hope to see you soon, the next week, in person, Lord willing. Jesus, thank you for this day, and I thank you for these middle schoolers. I pray that they can go out in their weeks, Lord, and just remember who you are, remember the sacrifice that you made, and just remember how much you love them, Lord. Even through their darkest times, you are with them, with your rod and your staff to comfort them. I just pray for them in their weeks, that you watch over them, watch over our leaders. Thank you for all that they do and just their hearts. Amen.
Communion to me is a time to thank God for all he has done, to thank and not ask for anything, because I feel like oftentimes we take God's love for granted and forget that communion isn't a regular prayer. It's a time of thanksgiving we give to God, and just take time to thank God and not ask if he can help us with this or that, like he would in prayer, but just thank him for all he has done for us. It's a time to recenter and realize how amazing our God is and what he did for us.